Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson. Here are today's top stories. The dispute rumbles on. Labour calls for Parliament to investigate whether Prime Minister Boris Johnson broke parliamentary rules during the revamp of his Downing Street flat. The Indian variant is now believed to be the dominant variant in the UK after confirmed cases increased by 80% in the past week. And Denmark passes a new law enabling the country to process asylum seekers in a holding centre outside of Europe. British holidaymakers in Portugal face more expenses and obstacles for their return to the UK after the country is moved to the Amber International Travel List. They will now have to face a further COVID-19 test before departure and quarantine on their return. NTD's Neil Woodrow has their reactions.
British tourists in Portugal's Algarve were angry on Friday following the UK's decision to reimpose a mandatory self-quarantine for travellers returning from the popular southern European destination. A holidaymaker in the Algarve from Bristol expresses her frustration.
I think they just need a reality check. They're obviously doing it just because they want to keep English in the UK, to spend their money in the UK, to get the economy back up. And they can't keep doing it to the English people. They need to just let us do what we need to do. And, you know, they open it up, they give us the green light so we can come here. We go through all of the procedures to come here. And then they do this. And I just think it's really, really wrong.
Another tourist from Liverpool thinks that it's the worst decision.
Because we've already made plans to come out of here. Now while we're on our holiday, we've got to start buying more tests for when we get home. I think it's disastrous.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps announced on June 3rd that Portugal was moving to the Amber List following increased concern about the spread of variants. He said there is a risk involved in bringing people back to the UK if they are not required to quarantine. President of Portugal's National Health Council, Enrique Barros, says the country's overall coronavirus situation is relatively stable. He stresses that hospital admissions at present are very low, at less than 25 people per million. Flights home from Portugal before new quarantine requirements come into force at 4 a.m. on Wednesday are at highly inflated prices. A seat on a Ryanair flight from the capital Lisbon to Manchester on Monday cost £339, whereas travel on the same route is available for just £75 on Wednesday. British Airways is charging £348 for flights from Faro to Heathrow on Sunday and Monday, but the price drops to £137 on Tuesday. The requirement for travellers to take a coronavirus test 3 days before flying to the UK is also creating difficulties for people in Portugal. One family has been unable to get tested despite visiting 5 medical centres and the region's main hospital. Portugal reported 769 new COVID-19 cases on June 3rd, the highest daily increase since early April. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
The Labour Party is calling for Parliament to investigate whether Prime Minister Boris Johnson broke parliamentary rules, even though Johnson was cleared of misconduct by the standards advisor he appointed.
Labour is calling for Parliament watchdog to investigate the Prime Minister over the funding of his Downing Street flat refurbishments. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, is calling for the Commissioner for Standards to probe whether Boris Johnson broke parliamentary rules by not declaring donations. The watchdog is already investigating whether Johnson properly declared a holiday on the Caribbean island of Mustique with his wife Carrie. Prime Ministers can use an annual public grant of up to £30,000 to decorate their Downing Street home, but the flat renovations reportedly cost much more than that. A report by the advisor on ministers' interests, Lord Geidt, found Boris Johnson was not aware of a donation made by a Tory peer towards the refurb. Johnson was in hospital with COVID-19 when the work began in spring last year. But Lord Geidt does say the Prime Minister acted unwisely in allowing the refurbishment to go ahead without more rigorous regard for how this would be funded.
Figures from Public Health England show new cases of the Indian variant increased nearly 80% in the past week. It has now become the dominant variant in the UK.
The COVID-19 variant that originated in India is now believed to be the dominant variant in the UK. According to Public Health England, for the week up to June 2nd, over 12,400 cases of the Indian variant were confirmed. That's up 79% from the previous week's total of nearly 7,000. Public Health England's latest risk assessment finds vaccines were less effective against the Indian strain compared to the Kent mutation. The findings also suggest people are more at risk of hospital admission if infected with the Indian variant. Bolton in Greater Manchester continues to be the most affected local area, where cases have risen by nearly 800 to over 2,000. But there are encouraging signs that the transmission rate in Bolton has begun to fall. On Thursday, over 5,000 new cases of COVID-19 were reported, nearly 1,000 more than Wednesday and the highest since early March.
New data says job vacancies in the UK are rising, but now there's not enough workers to fill those roles. NTD's Patrick Hayden has a look at the details.
Job vacancies are shooting up, but there's not enough workers to fill them. New data from accountancy firm KPMG says demand for new staff rose at the fastest rate in May for more than 23 years. But the number of workers available to fill those jobs dropped at the quickest rate since 2017. KPMG says the government should address the skills gap. It says IT and hospitality workers are most needed. The BBC reports a government spokesman said its multi-billion-pound plan for jobs, including the Kickstart scheme, is supporting employers across the country. The KPMG survey is based on responses from 400 recruitment and employment agencies. A partner said the jobs market seems to be firing on all cylinders. Patrick Hayden, NTD News, London.
6 former foreign secretaries urged the Prime Minister to ensure the crisis in Hong Kong is on the agenda for the G7 summit. The Conservative and Labour former ministers say the UK should take the lead on the international response. NTD's Jane Worrell reports.
The UK will chair the G7 summit next week. China is likely to be one of the key topics in the meeting of foreign leaders. In an open letter to the Prime Minister, 6 UK foreign secretaries say Boris Johnson should make sure the crisis in Hong Kong is on the agenda. They write, as the human rights situation in Hong Kong continues to deteriorate, we hope you will personally recognise the pronounced need for international leadership from the UK government on this matter. We spoke with one of the signatories of the letter, Lord David Owen, who says the G7 is a unique opportunity for countries to come together on Beijing's ongoing breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration, a treaty that gives Hong Kong unique freedoms not enjoyed in mainland China.
We have a residual obligation as a signatory to the treaty to uphold the agreement with Deng Xiaoping, and we will do. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will do this at this meeting with G7 plus these extra countries. And it's very important these extra countries are there. It spells out more the real global effect of these democratic countries coming together. And then they must look at these other problems that we have. The whole of their commercial performance is aggressive. We've all known that they've been stealing patents and misbehaving in that way. But we're now also seeing a military aggression. And for the first time for a very long time, it's clear that Beijing, and particularly President Xi, is considering the whole question of Taiwan. And that means a potential military invasion, which is quite unacceptable.
He joins former Conservative Foreign Secretaries Malcolm Rifkind and William Hague and Labour's Margaret Beckett, Jack Straw and David Miliband in urging the UK to take the lead on Hong Kong internationally. The current UK Foreign Secretary has said the UK will stand by Hong Kong and has offered Hong Kongers with BNO visas a route to citizenship in the UK. Since Beijing imposed its national security law in Hong Kong, numerous pro-democracy activists have been arrested in the city. The pressure is on for the international community to act. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Denmark's parliament passed a law enabling the Nordic country to relocate asylum seekers to countries outside of Europe. This is despite calls from NGOs and the UN to abandon the plans.
Danish lawmakers on Thursday voted in favour of establishing a refugee reception centre in a third country. The new law would allow Denmark to move refugees arriving on Danish soil to such centres. There, asylum seekers would have their cases reviewed. Critics fear an erosion of refugees' rights and undermining of international cooperation. One member of parliament defends the bill. He says that little more than 50% of asylum seekers arriving in Denmark have a need for seeking asylum.
They were migrants that were hoping for a better life, and I understand that, and I think that makes sense, but that's just not enough to get a resident permit to stay in Denmark.
He argues the changes will save lives.
When people realize that they will have to be sent back to a country outside Europe if they arrive in Denmark, they will stop going to Denmark. And that will mean that they will stop putting themselves in a dangerous situation on the Mediterranean Sea.
Since 2014, more than 20,000 migrants and refugees have died while trying to cross the sea. This NGO disagrees with the bill.
Well, first of all, it's nonsense to say that it's going to stop sea crossings, because it will not be possible to apply for asylum in the center. So people have to cross the sea anyway. So that's just ridiculous to call it kind of humanitarian. Nobody agrees that this is more humanitarian. So maybe the government is wrong.
The UN Refugee Agency is strongly opposed to the law and has called on Denmark to abandon it. The EU Commission also has concerns. It says outsourcing asylum processing outside Europe is not compatible with EU law. Denmark has yet to reach an agreement with a partner country, but there are negotiations with several candidates. The Scandinavian nation has a declared goal of receiving 0 asylum seekers. It claims instead to only accept refugees under the UN's quota system.
Britain's medicines regulator says it has approved the use of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine in children aged 12 or over.
Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency says their decision was taken after a rigorous review. The Commission on Human Medicine says more than 2,000 children were involved in a clinical trial to determine the safety of the vaccine. MHRA Chief Executive Dr. June Rain says the jab has been found to be safe and effective in this age group, and the benefits of this vaccine outweigh any risk. Both the United States and the European Union have approved the use of the Pfizer jab in children aged 12 to 15.
The UK and the European Union launches formal antitrust investigations into Facebook amid allegations that the world's largest social network is using customers' data to unfairly compete with advertisers.
The British government and the European Commission separately said on Friday they would investigate whether Facebook has misused its vast trove of data. The data was gathered from nearly 7 million companies that advertise on Facebook's marketplace.
Today we have opened a formal antitrust investigation to assess whether Facebook has violated EU competition rules by using advertising data gathered from advertisers in order to compete with them in the markets where Facebook is active, such as classified ads.
The UK's Competition and Markets Authority says it will be working closely with the European Commission to tackle these global issues. Facebook says it will cooperate fully with both the EU and UK investigations to demonstrate that they are without merit. The EU has fined Google nearly £7 billion and is investigating Amazon and Apple.
Still to come, Hong Kong police arrest an organizer of annual vigils for the victims of China's Tiananmen Square massacre on the day of its anniversary. That and more when we return.